All right, on this episode of Motorcycle Track Day Noob, I'm going to take you through some of the work that I've been doing on this bike. A lot of the work has actually just been discovery, figuring out what I've gotten. I've done quite a bit, and I shot quite a bit of video, and I've deleted most of it because, for the most part, I didn't know what I was actually looking at. Going through this bike, seeing all the different modifications that the previous owner had done, trying to figure out what I'm actually working with, and I've got a pretty good idea of what I got now, and I've got a pretty good plan of where I want to take this for the rest of the winter. So wrote down a couple things. Well, I've been writing down a lot of things, but I wrote down a couple things that I wanted to go over that I found on this bike. First being, not that I found anything crazy up front, but I did get the front brakes back on. I rebuilt those. New seals, 2 new pistons in the right caliper. I used the best 2 in the left caliper. This was the, I guess I rebuilt the master cylinder as well. This was the easiest system I've ever pressurized, and I've fought with these in the past. I reverse filled from the bottom of one caliper, loosen the banjo on the other, so I'm tight on the top, loose on that one, or sorry, so I filled from there until I got it coming out of the banjo on there, so I was full on the bottom, tighten that one up, then I reverse fill up to the top after loosening this till I get it dripping out, boom, then I was good for a bit. I left it overnight before trying to actually push the rest of the air out of the system, and blipping the top, I was able to get some of the bubbles out, but I had a really soft brake lever for a while, and God, it feels so nice now. It's so much better than it was before. Then I went to bleed the left, and I was like, shit, it's still soft. What am I missing? What am I missing? Went to bleed the right, and then boom, huge air bubble came out, and then nice and stiff. So that was a nice lesson in not trying to rush things. It was so much easier to do it that way. The back is rebuilt, new pads, no new pistons, everything outside of that, the seals are all good. I've got it hanging off because on the rear wheel, it got to me because those pads, the previous ones were metal on metal. This rotor is just trashed, and I'm sick of seeing it, and I know it's a liability potentially. So I bought another one that I'm gonna be putting on in a bit. It's a Arashi one, kind of going cheap on this because I know it's a Chinese one. I wouldn't be doing this for the fronts, but for the rears, I feel like that one's going to be all right. Hopefully I bought the right one. An interesting thing that I found is my axle's backwards. I don't know that that actually affects anything, but my axle is backwards. It's always been backwards. I'm positive. That's how I bought the bike, which is an interesting thing to find. I don't know, but the wheel's coming off. And actually, I think I'm going to keep the wheel off for a bit because when I get to the valve clearance, I think it's actually going to help me a bit. Something that took me a long-ass time, doesn't help the bike at all, but it just looks better. I don't know how long it's going to look better. I took the exhaust off from the mid-pipe out to the exhaust. I put all the hardware in evaporust, and I ran it through the ultrasonic cleaner, and I polished it with 800 grit, then 1000, then 1500, and then 2000 grit, and then finished with mother's mag and aluminum polish. And I think the downpipe looks real nice. If you know how these things turn out looking, they start looking real brown after a while, and it was like the one really sore thumb on this bike. I didn't take the exhaust off from the motor, just because I don't think it's going to matter much. I think it's going to go right back to where it was, but while it's sitting in my basement for the next couple months, I mean, at least it looks better. I don't know, I think it looks pretty cool right now. I don't think I ever want to do that again because it took about 5 hours of really mindless work. So that was probably an 8-beer job that isn't going to net me anything, but I don't know, I learned a couple things about the bike while doing it. The airbox I took off, and I'm still not certain whether or not this drain tube is modified. I think it is. I think that should have gone out and routed down towards the bottom of the bike. Not that it really matters much. The bigger thing is I realized the air filter is snorkeled or de-snorkeled. So this is a pretty common modification, and it made a whole lot more sense once I got into the carburetor and started reading about the common modifications for this bike. This is what one of the, it's not an OEM, but it is an OEM replacement essentially. This is the top of the air filter with the snorkel. I'm going to first get the bike running with this one because I know that it ran with this one. I will likely be de-snorkeling this too based off of everything that I've been seeing. I actually forgot that I bought this. This is a just a new magnetic drain plug for the oil, but it's pre-drilled, so I don't have to screw up my filter or my drain plug. I do have everything to drill these, but I didn't want to try drilling one until I had a replacement in case I fuck it up, which is a high likelihood because that's one of the things that I do in this basement. I fuck a lot of things up, so it's good to have spares before I start a new job. What else did I have on here? The oil fill. Oh! Oil fill. Oh, I know the oil fill. I put some bling on. Yeah, I bought a $25 oil fill cap. I don't know why. I just thought it looked cool. I don't know. I think everybody's just spending money on things they probably don't need, but I don't know. It kind of looks sweet. So the carburetor was a big thing, and I went through this. I documented all this for myself, really, with the videos that I shot, because in case I gotta go back and figure out something I may have changed that I may not have realized. So it's a pretty big deviance from stock on this bike, but the modifications are in line with what a lot of people do, from what I can tell. So it's got 152.5 mains and 17.5 pilots. Now, I didn't change any of the hardware inside of this. Outside of that, I wanted to change some of the rubber. I did buy a kit before I did this, but I didn't actually change the hardware. I put new float bowl gaskets in it because I just figured that by now they probably need it. However, I realized somebody had been in this carburetor fairly recently, and most of the stuff was all still very good, especially because the float valves, float needles and everything had been replaced, so I actually didn't change those. The only other thing I put in, under the air fuel mixture screws, and I'm positive, I triple checked to make sure it wasn't just stuck in there. One of the O-rings was missing. It had the washer, but it didn't have... No, sorry. It was missing the washer. The O-ring was in there. It didn't have the washer, so it should go O-ring, washer, spring, and it was missing the washer, so I put a washer in. That's the only changes that I made on the carburetor. I was 2.5 turns out on the air fuel mixture screw on both of the carburetors. There's a weird thing that somebody had done on here. So one of these needs to be plugged. These are the vacuum ports here. There's like some crazy tube and tape job on it, and I was like, oh, that can't be OEM, so I looked up, it definitely wasn't OEM. So the needle is non-stock. It looks, I wrote down the needle that it is. I think it's one of the, I don't know, it looked very similar to what the other needle was. I don't know what the characteristic was, that how it was different. I assume it was likely part of one of those stage 1, 2, 3 jet kits, so this would probably be one of those stage 2 jet kits. I'm not totally certain how that needle affects it. There are 2 shims under the needle, so that was a good thing to see. And everything is real good now after running through the ultrasonic and then blowing everything out with the air compressor and whatnot. And I don't think I should have any problems, but anytime you touch one of these carburetors or something, you just never know. So I'm kind of worried about getting the bike started, but luckily I got several months to do it. Interesting thing that I saw was that when I pulled this out, and I was worried about this because I read that these choke plungers can end up getting scored, and basically they can always be letting, you know, some fluid past, well, air past, fluid past, it's letting material past. So I was actually wondering if I need to polish these things up and get them cleaned up, but going through the box of spares that I'd gotten from the guy, these had actually been replaced. And this is probably why I saw that the float valves and the needle valves were so good, because they had just recently been replaced. But I just thought it was strange that I actually found the choke plungers replaced, and they look fine to me. I don't know. I thought that was weird. I didn't expect to see that. The big thing that's been throwing me through a loop on here, and it's actually been throwing me through a loop for several years, actually, before I owned this bike, is this throttle position sensor. I've been so goddamn confused on how the manual says you're supposed to adjust this. It doesn't seem like you can adjust something like this. I mean, it just plugs in there and it's supposed to be there. I get it now. So I was having to go at it with my Harbor Freight multimeter, which ended up just breaking a tip, and then I lost my temper and threw the thing across the room. So I called my friend, who is an electrical engineer, and I said, please help me. Just tell me which multimeter I need to buy. I want to buy it once and then not have to think about it again. So I know how I need to set this thing. It is off. It's also off on my Bandit. It's actually off in the same way. It's not where it should be, so I'm actually hoping this adjustment is going to help both the SV650 and the Bandit. I've read that these things really don't do anything on the SV650, and I believe it's probably going to be the same on the Bandit, but it can't hurt to get it to where it's supposed to be. So with the electronics on this bike, that I found a big worry. You read about the horror stories about the green plug of death. This one, actually, I'll grab the flashlight. I was worried when I pulled this thing apart. So basically, this connector is apparently undersized for the load that goes through it. So a lot of times you'll see it start to burn, and I'm not seeing any evidence of that at all. It looked to me watching, because the videos are sparse, but it looked to be a bigger issue on the second gen. But I was still worried about it, and one of the workarounds is to actually just remove the, the one wire that is usually the issue, which I think is this orange wire here. I'm not doing it, so I didn't put too much more research into it, but basically take it out of the connector and just solder it together, or maybe just do it with all of them. But because in 27,000 miles, I don't see any evidence of this ever having an issue, and I haven't experienced an issue, I'm not gonna do it yet. I think it's just, I don't think it would be a good idea to do it, at least, especially not now, with all the variables that I'm introducing, so I'm not going to. The regulator rectifier on here, something tells me this is not stock. This is not how it normally looks stock. I don't know what was done with it. I know it's a fairly common upgrade to switch this. I don't know what was done with this. I know that I want to pull this off right now, but I have too many projects going on at once. Electrical stuff throws my brain into a tizzy, and I'm just not going to do it yet. I probably will start pulling that thing apart to figure out what that is. It could be stock for all I know, but I kind of doubt it. And then I also think I may luck out on this, that I may have guessed the tachometer calibration correctly, and this may actually be calibrated correctly. That is, unlike a second gen where it sweeps to 7,000 and it comes back down, and that's your calibration, this one doesn't do anything like that. So when I put the needle back on, if you put the needle at full rest and then turn the ignition on, well, I got the green plug unplugged, it will go up to 3,000 or 3,500 RPM. One of those two, I can't remember exactly which one. So what I did is that I turned the ignition on where it was energized at 0 RPMs and then put the needle on at that point. And then I think that would be the 0 point, and then any RPMs would go up from there. I found a single article about it where he made one mention, one line about it, and I'm pretty sure that's correct. I can't find a thing in the factory service manual or the climber manual about how to calibrate this tachometer. So it may end up turning into a huge thing. I may have just gotten lucky and anticipated how it was supposed to work correctly. We'll see. Suspension was always the dark arts to me, remains the dark arts. On the rear, I found this thing, I moved it up quite a bit. So this is a Penske 8983 double clicker. The preload on this was out of control. Now this was set up for a rider much bigger than me, but it was still out of control. And I have a feeling it's why I felt like I was always falling forward and why it felt so stiff. Not that my time at the track was a great indication because of how slow I am, but the rebound on this, or potentially just because the preload was so high, you see all this leading edge. You only see leading edge wear on my tires, and it's basically nice on the back. I think that's an indication of that your rebound is either too quick, or it's contacting the ground too harsh on the rebound, and it's wearing the leading edge. If it was trailing edge, you'd have different issues, but because it's leading edge, I think that's where I need to adjust. Not that I was going fast enough that it was really actually going to matter, but in my limited capacity on how a suspension is supposed to work in the back, I think I've got a whole lot of work to do with that. Plus, it's a fancy ass shock, so I'll run it this year, figure out how it actually works. I think, well, I was told it had 7,000 miles on it after I bought it, so I think it's probably coming up to a time where it might need to be serviced. So run it for a year, figure out, you know, what in the world it is, and then get it reserviced after this year once we go back to the snowy whatever the hell it is outside that makes me sad and I want to kill myself. I don't actually want to kill myself. No, not yet. Do I? Not yet. So I had the front forks off, and I found out quite a bit from inside of here. I knew that it wasn't Race Tech emulators, but I didn't know what it was. So I'm almost certain that the emulators that are inside of here are the Harley 41mm knockoffs that you find on eBay. And quite frankly, the front end of this bike felt great to me. I also don't know what a front end should feel like, but it felt better than any other one that I've been on. When I checked the fork oil volume in them, it was at like 400 milliliters per fork, which is way lower than when I reloaded them, because I just reloaded them with 15 weight fluid with the emulators inside up to a 4.33 inch air gap, and I was at about 460 milliliters, and stock is like 490 milliliters. So there's a huge air gap inside of these. It's got 0.90 sonic springs inside of it, and I posted something out. I was talking to somebody on my the comment section of one of my previous videos, and I was saying that I want to get the Traction Dynamics damper rods with the cartridge emulators built in on top of them, and they're like $400, and I still kind of want to, but it kind of made me think that wasn't the best idea, not yet. And the reason I wanted to do it is because I just want a known, because I know so little about how suspension is supposed to be. I just want a known so I can just set it up for somebody my weight based on people much smarter than me telling me what I should do. And I can't do that if I'm using a generic and nobody knows what the spring rate is or anything on that, and they don't know how to set up the preload because nothing's been published on the thing. But I'm now seeing how much money I'm spending, and I'm not even... The way he described it would be a lateral move to go that way outside of getting the information on it. And the other thing I could do, and one of the inspirations for doing it, is that I can move it over into my Bandit, because these forks are the same, so I can move it over there. But I could put that one off of here, and it's going to allow me to put some more money into other parts of the bike. The unfortunate thing is I got to take these forks back off because I didn't set up the fucking preload, or the preload correctly on the emulators, which really sucks, which means I got to pull the whole front back off again. I got to use my fancy new little head lift stand and whatnot, but I should probably get used to taking this thing on and off and get better at the procedure anyway, but it is what it is. So that's something I'm going to do next year, probably, or I should just figure out how well you can do it with the cheap Harley emulators. And maybe they're even better than the other ones, who knows? I just don't know how to set them up. And that's it pretty much for what I found on the Discovery, besides the valves. Well, two things, the valves and spark plugs. I expected to find CR8Es inside of there, and that's what I had, which looked like that with the single electrode? The single sparker. Well, what I pulled out, and the picture's not really indicative of what's inside here, but these are the dual plug, or yeah, the dual electrode ones, and that's what he's got inside of here. But more importantly is he's running the CR9 EKs inside of here, and spark plugs in 8 is hotter than a 9. So he's running the CR9 EKs, and I saw that from some of my researches, that's a fairly common thing to do, that a lot of tuners, basically when you start messing with the air fuel inside of these bikes, is actually go to one of those colder plugs. And just because I don't want to make any changes on this until I get it running at least as well as it was before I started taking the thing apart, I also ordered a set of the CR9 EKs to go with the CR8Es, so I will go with the CR9 EKs first. The front spark plug is pretty damn corroded all around it, and I'm pretty sure that's because that one ends up eating a whole lot more water and all the shit, all the elements. This one looked all right for the most part, but should I replace them right away? Probably should just replace them right away. So I think I will do that. I had the valve covers off, and I checked the valve clearances. You got to take the front, not the front, but the cooling system, the radiator off the front. When I pulled the fluid out, which unfortunately is right here, it's on a part of the bike where you can't tip it this way, so you kind of make a mess. I was able to capture 1,450 milliliters. I know for a fact I at least dropped 100 milliliters on the floor, so that would put me to 1,550 milliliters, and this thing's supposed to take like 1.6 to 1.7 liters, so I think I got most of it out, because I also ended up dropping some out when it came out inside of the radiator and whatnot. So I think I got most of it evacuated, but the reason I wanted to pull all of it out or measure it after I pulled it out is so that I know that I'm filling it up fully once I get back to that. And also this cooling system, well, again, not cooling system, but the radiator is way easier to take off than pulling it off of like that interceptor and whatnot. You can have this thing off in like 3 minutes when it's dry like this. If not, then you gotta wait longer for it to drain a bit. But the unfortunate part about looking at the valve clearances was that I was so close to being in spec. I was so close. Now they're all on the tight end of spec, but I was so close. They need to be on the intakes. What is it? 0.004 to 0.008. And they need to be on the exhaust. 0.008 to 0.012. All 4 of those are in spec, all on the tightest of tolerance, but all in spec. These 2 in spec. This one in spec. This one out by 1,000th. That one was. That exhaust was 0.007 thousandths of an inch. The rest of them were right on, right on, right on. It was basically, they were all tight. They are all tight. And this one is 1,000th out. Realistically, I'd probably be okay to leave it. But there's no better time than now to get in there and actually learn how to do on these valve clearances. And this shim under bucket valve clearance adjustment has been scaring me for a very long time. However, I should just do it. So what I bought is a set of the hot body cams, whatever they're called, a shim kit, except I didn't get the big box of shims because those only come with 3 of each size. And it may not, even though it would have been way more shims, it may not have had all the ones that I need. I think the shims that are going to be underneath all of these are going to be 0.165 or 0.175, if I'm thinking correct. Yeah, or sorry, 1.65 and 1.75, I think. And you won't know until you take it off, because even if these have never been modified before, the factory may have put different ones inside of it based on the valve clearance that they needed to ship the thing out. So you don't know which shims you need until you see what's inside of it with the clearances that you measure. So I bought this refill kit that has 5 of each from 1.5 up to 1.75. So with being able to flip the things around and with these, and knowing that I've got to go open more on all of my clearances, knowing that I'm on the tight end of all my clearances right now, I think I will have everything I need. If not, then it is what it is. But when I do it, I kind of want to knock it all out at once. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to pull this rear wheel off, put that Chinese piece of steel on the back, and then pull the cooling, I keep saying cooling system. Cooling system would be the whole system. I'm going to pull the radiator back off, and I'm going to pull the valve. Oh, no, I'm not going to pull it. I know why I'm going to do it. I'm not going to pull the valve covers off yet. I wanted to do a compression test, which I've never done on a bike that doesn't, why do I have the ignition on? Which I've never done on a bike that doesn't have a kickstart. I've only ever done it on a bike with a kickstart, but I don't see any reason not to do a compression test right now. I wish I had the materials to do, the tools to do a leak down test. That would be smart to do it. And I'm gonna buy the $100 Motion Pro one to do it, because that's probably a good tool to have in your arsenal. But I could do a compression test right now. I just gotta make sure that I know what to do with the spark plug when it's not plugged into anything, so I don't accidentally start a fire, even though there is no fuel over here. I just don't want to damage anything. Anyway, I think I'll end the video right now. I don't know. If there's more video to this, it's because I shot a video of me working on it. If not, thanks for watching.